Let's get started, insha'Allah ta'ala. We are continuing in the Lucid Word. And we started reading this seventh additional condition of prayer. But we didn't finish. So let's just read from the top and go from there. The author says, may Allah have mercy upon him, to cover the Awrat, that's the religious nudity. Even if one were alone, we're talking about for prayer here, as a prayer condition. And we talked about outside of the prayer last time. Even if one were alone, praying alone, or praying in the darkness, to cover with what conceals the color of the skin. What means something that. Usually it's going to be clothing. But even if that were leaves, and even if that were mud, then that's valid for prayer. I remember, subhanallah, in days less mature for myself and for other brothers. And I mean other brothers who don't study with us, but they study whatever they study. And we had discussion about whether it's valid for a woman to conceal her skin with mud. And they denied it. Maybe they wouldn't deny it now. Now we're older and we learned more things, even their own stuff. Provided that one cannot see the skin color through the cover. The skin color through the cover. It's going to say what that means. Provided that one cannot see the skin color through the cover in a normal or at a normal distance where people sit to converse. Therefore, it is not sufficient if one is able to distinguish between dark and fair skin through that single cover. We mentioned that. Yani, you can ask if that's not clear for you. Through a cover, yani, it is not sufficient if one is able to distinguish between dark and fair skin through a cover in such a setting. So if it's too transparent, it's not valid to pray in it. The scholars said they had an agreement that it's not valid to pray naked in water. That's to give you an idea, because the water is covering the person. The cover must conceal the entire body of a free woman, except her face and hands. Yes. You know the limits of her face from wudu, when you learned wudu. And hands means from the wrists to the fingertips. Because neither are part of the awrah, the religious nudity. Neither the face nor the hands. The scholars said the woman is not obligated to cover these parts because she needs to be able to uncover them. And she is obligated to cover the other parts because she doesn't need to uncover them. The free woman, that is. That's not the proof for the rule. That's not the proof for the rule. That's the reasoning for the rule. The proof for the rule is going to be the ayah from the Quran or the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And sometimes the rule doesn't have any reasoning, meaning that it's merely following the Prophet's technique alayhi salatu wasalam, or following his instruction. But sometimes the rules do have illah, they have a reasoning. That's what I find most intriguing about fiqh, the reasoning more than the rules, personally. You learn fiqh, you learn all these rules. But what is the reasoning behind those rules? That's very enlightening stuff. A lot of times you don't learn the reasoning. And it is a condition to cover the area between the navel and the knees of a male. For prayer, we're talking, as a prayer condition. They added here, free or not. That's not from the text. They could have put it in a footnote if they wanted to. Then nobody will think that's in the text. And a female slave. Yani, the female slave, her awra in the prayer, her religious nudity in the prayer is like that of a male. So they didn't assign any translation here for awra in this whole chapter here, or put a footnote. So it's like what was done was left, you were given the Arabic word and then left to know the religious parameters here. And then you know what's awra. But if you wanted a translation, the Arabic word awra means ma yustaha minhu, something taboo. That means something that you're shy about it. And it also means naqas. That means a flaw or defect. A person might have awra. This here meaning not nakedness, but means a defect. Something wrong with him. Could be personal defect too, not talking about necessarily physical defect. Like personality flaw. Or sins that one commits. Could be the awra of the person. So it means here, if we want one word, it means the nakedness or the nudity. So the female slave, her awra in the prayer is like the male. It says because the nudity of both of them is the area between the navel and the knees. Or maybe if we wanted a compound word, we could say the prayer nudity. Because we said last time, a man, if he's not praying, and even if he's in privacy and in the dark, if he has no reason, he has to cover his private parts, front and back. And the woman in such a scenario would cover what's between her navel and her knees. Free woman. The concealment needs to be from all sides of the nudity, except from underneath, or except from beneath, or except from the bottom. You said, is this why they didn't give awra a definition because of many definitions? No, because many definitions here is just linguistic. Remember, you have linguistic meaning of words and religious meaning of words. Hajj means something in the language, and zakah, and siyam, and salah, and all those words mean something in the Arabic language. Then the Prophet came with the religion, alayhi salatu wassalam, and the religion has special usages for these already known words. So it's not for that purpose, because there's a religious definition, which, yani, could be said, they gave you the religious definition, which is all this talk here. So I'm saying that it appears to me They didn't translate it, and what they did was they just left you to understand what it is by all of the talk that comes in the paragraph. And I'm saying, so if you want a word, then it means pretty much nudity in this context, or nakedness. And if we want to take a step further, there is a nudity for the prayer. So I said maybe if we wanted to make a compound word, we could say prayer nudity or prayer nakedness, meaning this is what you have to cover in the prayer. Because outside the prayer, if you're a man outside the prayer, then you could be as bare as only covering the private parts. Possible to be in that scenario. To be only as bare as covering the front and back private parts. And a woman outside of the prayer, it's possible for her to be in a scenario where she could be as bare as just covering what's between her navel and her knees, the free woman. And that's Shafi'i school. Yani, a Shafi'i says haram to be nude pointlessly. But one could be nude for any reason. That means doesn't have to be an emergency.
Shaykh, I have a question.
Yes.
I want a clarification. You said that outside of the prayer, the woman can be uncovered except between her navel and her knees?
I said it's possible that she's in a scenario. It's possible that she's in a situation that she's as bare as what's between her navel and her knees only. Like Yani, not what's she. The only thing that's covered is what's between her navel and her knees. That's what I meant to say.
Okay, so is that like a situation, a scenario is when she's taking a shower?
Yani, like she's in privacy, just in privacy. For example,
Okay.
She says in privacy, she's not praying. She doesn't have any reason to be completely nude. If she had a reason, then it wouldn't be haram.
Yes, understood. But in the scenario, she could be like that, uncovered, except between the navel and the knees.
Yeah, there's Yani. It's possible that this could be her case. That's why we're saying like she's in privacy, because if she were in the presence of men, marriageable men, or eligible men, then she would have to cover more than that, even if she's not praying.
So understood. Better thank you.
So what we're saying here is differentiating between what you have to cover in the prayer and out of the prayer. So I have a synopsis here for you. I can share it with you. I'll read this for you. It says here, Bismillah, linguistically, an awrah is a flaw or something taboo. Legally, religiously, it is the amount of the body that must be covered, as proven by the saying of Allah in Surah Al-A'raf, ayah 26. Ya bani Adam qad anzalna alaykum libasan yuwari sawatikum. O children of Adam, we have created for you clothing covering your shameful parts. So atikum, that's front and back in particular. Some add to the definition in prayer. Allah says in Al-A'raf 31, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. Come to every prayer dressed. So according to the rules we learned. According to, for example, Shafi'i school, that's what we learned. How to do so. How to fulfill that command there. As interpreted by Ibn Abbas. That's the meaning of the ayah according to Ibn Abbas. At-Tirmidhi narrated, لا تقبل صلاة الحائض إلا بخمار. The prayer of a woman of menstruating age is unaccepted without a headscarf. This proves that it is a prayer condition when able. Covering the awrah is a prayer condition when able. However, since being clear of filth is also a condition, one chooses exposure over covering with a filthy cover for prayer. Yani, like say a woman only had a scarf that had najasa on it and she had no way to clean it off. Then she prays without that scarf. That's better than putting it on. One chooses exposure over covering with filthy cover for prayer. Those are your choices. Either pray without covering some part of your awrah or cover with najasa. Yani clothing that has najasa. So then exposure over covering with najasa. One chooses exposure over covering with filth, with the filthy cover for prayer, and makes complete bowing and prostration. Yani meaning assuming the person was completely naked and had no pure clothing for prayer. He will pray without this clothing and bow completely and prostrate completely, and does not have to repeat. That's not like missing water and soil. Don't mix those. Keep those separated for yourselves. You're taking notes there. Someone's lacking clothing for prayer. Someone's lacking all purifiers for prayer. Two different cases here. Lacking clothing for prayer, he's going to pray as is and doesn't have to make up the prayer. Lacking all purifiers for prayer, no water, no soil. You're going to pray as is and make it up later. So one makes complete bowing and prostration and does not have to repeat. Otherwise, exposure of nudity invalidates the prayer, if that's not the person's case. Whether intentional, that's going to invalidate your prayer. Exposing the awrah while praying, exposing it intentionally, that's going to invalidate your prayer. Or due to negligence, that's going to invalidate your prayer. Due to negligence means you entered into the prayer unable to do the moves of the prayer without the awrah appearing. So what's neither intentional nor due to negligence? Is it possible for a person's awrah to become exposed in the prayer unintentionally and not due to negligence? Yes. If the wind, for example, exposes him and he immediately recovers, his prayer is not invalidated. Or else it is. If he doesn't immediately recover, it will become invalidated. And likewise, if the waistcloth unravels. And likewise, if the waistcloth, that's the izar, if it unravels, then the awrah became exposed, and then he recovered, or she recovered the awrah immediately, the prayer is still valid. Now, I took that in more than one book that I took, but Shaykh Ahmed Dirawi told me, leave this saying. This is usually due to negligence. I'm sharing it with you because I took it in more than one book without those who taught us telling us to leave it. But I'm mentioning to you also what he told me. If the waistcloth unravels, he said, this is usually due to negligence. Comprehend further that the obligation of covering applies in privacy and darkness. This is what we're talking about now. Out of respect for God, except with purpose. Yani, the minimum purpose doesn't have to be urgent, like bathing, changing, and cooling off. Because the four reported, that's Abu Dawood, An-Nasa'i, At-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah, those four imams of hadith. Because the four reported that the Prophet ﷺ said about nudity in privacy, Allahu ahaqqu an yustahya min. Allah is most entitled to be mindful of. Because sometimes you have respect for God, out of respect for God. Like how you refrain from some words out of respect for God. Even sometimes it might be true words and still you're going to refrain from them out of respect. Then some scholars say, we don't say Allah is the creator of evil, period. But they believe that though. They don't deny it. They're saying this sentence, we find it not most respectful. We say Allah is creator of good and evil, and we don't say Allah is creator of evil out of respect for God. Or the awrah is what is forbidden to look at. Yeah, and even the scholars might define something religiously with different words. The male's nudity, we have two cases here. In privacy, out of prayer, is the front and back privates mentioned in the verse of Surah Al-A'raf. So that's when you're going to have a loincloth. Loincloth in the front, loincloth in the back, if that's called loincloth too. Cloth in the front, cloth in the back, and string around to hold them. In prayer, or in the presence of who must not see his nudity. The man's nudity is between navel and knee. Not including the navel and knees, as opposed to the Hanafis who included the knees. The Hanafi said, yeah, and the knees. The Shafi'i said, not the knees, up to the knees. But you have to get a little bit of the knees to make sure you got everything. But not because they're knees, but just to make sure you got everything. The Hanafis are saying, no, the knees are included. The female's nudity in privacy or in the presence of ineligible men. Ineligible men. We'll usually say non-marriageable. I think ineligible might be a better word. That means religiously ineligible. So that's her maharim. In privacy or in the presence of ineligible men or in the presence of a Muslimah, not kafirah. Or if she's a nursing woman in the presence of disbelieving female relatives. Or if she were a slave woman, then her nudity is like a man in prayer. It's like a man in prayer. What's the nudity of a man in prayer? Between navel and knees. So in the other book, when it says their nudity is like a man, means it's like a man in prayer. What about a man outside of prayer in privacy? Not that little bit. In prayer and out of prayer, in the presence of eligible men, her nudity is all of her body but face by consensus, proven by the hadith of the lady from Khat'am. The hadith of the lady from Khat'am proves a woman doesn't have to cover her face. And this is ijma' of all mujtahids. And hands. It was said that's ijma'. Hands was said that's ijma'. If we say hands is ijma', that means whoever said not hands, then his saying is irregular, wrong, basically deemed wrong altogether. Or if we're not going to say hands by ijma', it's because some mujtahid said she has to cover her hands. From wrist to fingertip. Saying a woman's face is nudity is a massive blunder. Saying her face is part of her awrah is a massive blunder. It is also a mistake to say it must be covered before eligible men without being nudity. So that's what some people say. So they were trying to be more careful. They said, "La, it's not awrah," meaning they knew better. Really, they knew better. So some people do say that. They say, "No, it's not awrah," but she still has to cover it. So how she have to cover if it's awrah? If it's not awrah, they said because there's too much fitna. She has to cover to repel the fitna. We say that's not a proof. So that's a mistake too. Allah says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. They are not to expose their decor, the women, but what is displayable. Yani, maybe that's loose translation. Maybe it's not really easy to translate these words. So that's just give you an idea. وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ. They do not display their zina, their decor. Or they do not expose their decor. So what that means is all of their bodies. إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. Except what appears from it. So it's translated here. Except what is displayable, which is face and hands. Ibn Abbas and Aisha said the face and hands, and others said so too. In the presence of a disbelieving woman, a Muslimah may expose what she would expose while doing housework. So that means her hair, her neck, forearms, maybe roll her pants up. So, concealing any contrast between lighter and darker skin color. Not contours. That means not curves. That's for men and women. That's not only for women. Remember, all rules are for men and women unless there's a proof to make a difference between them. Concealing any contrast between lighter and darker skin color, not contours, with pure material. Even if by leaves or clay or murky water or clear water with an opaque film. That means the water itself is clear, but there's something on top of the water. And the person got in there, and now you can't see his outer from any direction. From all directions but underneath. Now, from all directions but underneath, that's for men and for women. But the outer of the woman is different from the outer of the man. So the underneath starts at a different spot for each one. The woman's whole body is awra, so underneath means underneath her body. Yani starts from the floor. That's why if you put a mirror next to the woman's foot and you could see any of her awra in the reflection, this means her awra is not covered for the prayer. From all directions but underneath. So if you can't see the awra from the top or from the sides, then that's sufficient. So if someone had a shirt with a wide collar, so if he's standing in front of you, you can't see his navel. But if he bends over, you could see his navel because his collar's so wide. And this is not sufficient. Or a woman has wide cuffs. If you're just looking at her from across yourself, you're standing across from her, you might not see any of her awra, but her prayer wouldn't be valid because her cuffs are so wide, her arms can be seen from other than underneath. From all directions but underneath. Hakadha. So remember, covering the awra in Shafi'i school is the opposite of wearing khufs. How's that? Because covering the awra is from all directions except underneath, while wearing the khuf is from all directions except atop, except from top. The khufs have to be covered from all directions except from the top. The awra has to be covered from all directions except underneath. And also, the awra has to conceal the color of the skin and the hair. And the khuf does not have to conceal the color of the skin and hair to be valid khufs, that is. It's not going to be valid for a woman without socks to wear transparent khufs, though. It says here, concealing any contrast between lighter and darker skin color, not contours, with pure material, even if by leaves or clay or murky water or clear water with an opaque film, from all directions but underneath, from the eyes of humans and genies and angels, not one's own eyes. You don't have to conceal your awra from your own eyes, but that is disliked. So better also not to look at your own awra. This concealing is obligatory, since the four report that God's messenger says, احفظ عورتك إلا من زوجتك أو ما ملكت يمينك. Guard your nudity except from your wife or what your right hand possesses. According to this, for a woman to pray with a dress to her mid-shin and knee-high stockings is not valid. So if that's not clear for you, let me know. طيب. Then the rest is some more details we don't have to read now. You said not clear? Okay. The last sentence. According to this, for a woman to pray with a dress to her mid-shin and knee-high stockings is not valid. Yeah, because she's wearing a dress. Okay. This dress goes to her mid-shin, doesn't go all the way down to her feet. Okay, and then her stockings go up to her knees. So if you're looking at her, just standing across from her, you don't see any of her awra. But if you put a mirror right next to her foot, would some of her awra appear there? in that reflection? Yes, so it's not valid for prayer, not valid for prayer. So here, it says here, and it is a condition to cover the area between the navel and the knees of a female, of a male and a female slave, because the awra of both is the area between the navel and the knees. The concealment needs to be from all sides of the awra except from underneath, i.e. the awra from underneath does not need to be covered. Because heck of it. From underneath does not have to be concealed. So, if a sister had socks and then she tucked her pants into her socks and she made sure her cuffs were sealed and she tucked her headscarf into her collar and she tucked her shirt into her pants, let's say she's wearing pants, now she's concealed really from all directions, including underneath. Now she's completely concealed even from underneath. That's valid. But it's not a condition to conceal from underneath. So that means if she had something that goes all the way to the ground, from her head down to the ground, there's nothing but space for her face and maybe her hands too. But even if her hands weren't, even if it's just one sheet covering her entire body with a space for her space, for a space for her face, a space to expose her face, and then when she bows and prostrates, nothing appears. But if someone were to stand under her and could see through her floor, he could see her awra. This is valid. Wallahu a'lam. Let's stop there. Any question?
Yes. The question that I got is, when Prophet Adam alayhi salam created in the Jannah, was his aura covered? Many people ask that.
His aura was covered. His and his wife's aura were covered with clothing of light. That clothing made of light. Then when they ate from the fruit, the light went out and their aura became exposed. And they started covering themselves with leaves.
Shaykh Ryan, I have a question, please.
Yes.
In the prayer, the section A, give me clarification, please. In prayer or in the presence of ineligible men, not eligible to be married, or a Muslimah, or in the presence of disbelieving female relatives, or if she was a slave.
If she's a nursing woman in the presence of disbelieving female relatives.
Oh, nursing.
Yes.
Does that all have to, are they the same in the prayer with the Muslimah and ineligible men? Because maybe I just took my eyes up while I was writing, went back down and start writing. Maybe I mixed this A up with something else. It was just confusing. Ineligible men and Muslim men.
Okay, so it says here, the female's nudity in privacy or in the presence of ineligible men or in the presence of a Muslimah, another Muslimah, or in the presence of kafir women, but she's a nursing woman, kafir relatives, disbelieving female relatives, and this Muslimah is a nursing woman, so she has her mother there, for example, or her sister or something.
Yes.
Or a slave woman. Then her awra is what's between her navel and her knees.
Even if it's ineligible men?
Ineligible, yeah. Ineligible. That means her relatives who cannot marry her.
Oh, yes, right. I have it. Better, Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Shaykh.
You're welcome.